Hi, this is Art, and I'm going to start off with my desktop. This is going to be a talk about a lot of vacation pictures and other pictures, and I appreciated Jerry's pictures. I appreciated John Kraut's pictures of the geocaching. A lot of vacation pictures. You're going to see some of those again from my perspective here. This demonstration actually follows a shorter presentation I gave last month to our UChug user group. And then Judy asked me if I could present a few examples of how to use GIMP to modify photos. I'll go ahead and start my slide deck here now. So we're going to go to a program called GIMP, the new image manipulation program. And I've been using photo editing programs for over 20 years, and I continue to edit pictures for my personal pleasure and for our user group's newsletter. Now, if you've been around picture or image editing for a while, you're familiar with Adobe Photoshop. It's a professional grade editing tool, once available pretty easily, but now it's a pretty costly option. And then long ago, I started using the shareware version of Paint Shop Pro, which is no longer available. It was purchased by Corel in 2011. So GIMP was the program I found in 2014 with the power and tools similar to Paint Shop Pro. It's free and available to both Windows and Linux and meets all of my needs. Why do we edit photos? Well, there are a lot of simple editing features available in Google Paint and Microsoft Paint and many other tools. Filters that rotate. Sometimes you can edit a photo before downloading from your camera, and then you may want to do some additional editing. But why more editing? Well, perhaps you want to remove the beer can in the background or some other distraction, or you forgot the flash. Google Photos actually are a good starting point for that. But you may need to add more contrast or brighten, and you can do that with GIMP. You can add text, backgrounds, people, even, well, create a whole new imaginary world in your mind. Where do I use these photos I've manipulated? Well, I'll show you some of my personal photos that I've created for use at home, newsletter, social media, and even a headshot for a National Zoom webinar. Almost all editing programs have several of these tools, plus many more. Programs like Microsoft Paint, MyPaint, Pixlr, Photoscape, Aurifan View, Darktable, all easily available. Some do not have all the professional tools found in GIMP, and some have others that are not found here. Most have the basic tools to erase and draw directly on a picture, make structural changes like cropping and rotating. Other tools can make changes to brightness, color, other effects. And then professional tools add features like layers and transparencies, which will be something we'll be talking a lot about today. I'll demonstrate most of these tools today, but many more exist, and I'll have some suggestions for some tutorials on how to use those at the end of the presentation. Okay, some examples of photos. Well, this is a picture from an old family photo album. Maybe it needs some help, so you can post it on your social media account, like a throwback Thursday photo of mom from decades gone by. Maybe a vacation trip to Silverton, Colorado is the earliest photo in the old album you can find of yourself and your grandparents, and the only one I ever saw with my granddad smiling from 1949. I was 10 months old. A late evening walk at my cousin's house in Colorado. You saw this as my wallpaper. A soothing vacation memory now greets me each time I sit down to my computer. Another vacation trip across the country to a real live train museum with restored rail cars, a round table, steam and diesel locomotives. Start the memory-making machine recording. and with your grandchild in tow, well, that first walk, hand in hand, a historic place that you'll never forget, every detail firmly imprinted forever. Just picture that. Well, that photo could even lead to an award. Would you imagine winning an award for a photograph and be given a real certificate from an international organization like the APCUG and by another award winner himself? Well, that little girl started growing up, dressing up. That is my princess in the castle foyer. Vacation trips in front of famous places will certainly get into the family album. Start the music to Someday My Prince Will Come, believe it or not. Maybe all you need is a simple headshot photo for that unexpected presentation you get called on to do. Well, this is what started it all. A trip to the beach after months of meeting with only on Zoom, made even better with cake and the people you hadn't been with for 15 months, celebrating our user group's 42nd anniversary. And it was nice to have Jim, the first UCHUG president from 1978, sitting right up front, and Greg, our current president, in the back row with a wide-brimmed hat, and even the editor on the far right, in the photo, I mean, not politically. The problem, well, none of these photos escaped untouched, except, well, that one. What changed? From a little to a lot. Time for a reality check. We'll look at the originals before we jump into GIMP and see how it's done. Reality? Well, it was a couple of precious photos from my family's album, but black and white photos are so blah by today's standards. And a 2-inch high photo of your mom, rest in peace, really needed that pop of color. And yes, she confirmed that was the correct color. As to the one-horse sleigh, well, I can only wish I remembered it, but with a little imagination and that big smile, it becomes a memory. 2 photos. On the left, just before sunset, notice the bright light, the sun shining across the road. The second photo, several feet down the road and a couple minutes later, after the sun is down. But together, they make a great wallpaper. Sometimes you have a chance to get that one-time photo, even if it is in the hallway at home, and if she's being patient with you and lets you take the photo, take it. Worry about the background later. Now, time passes quickly. An Easter photo is worth 1,000,000 words. And those braces were so worth it. But posing with me was just part of the fun. Someday her prince will come. And in a blink, and 2 boyfriends later, that's 2 friends who were boys, despite the prom and the homecoming, but just friends. So you take a photo when he drops by the house after some event. He's looking mighty good. You get another one of those in the hall photos, knowing someday he will make it into the picture somewhere far, far away. The headshot was pretty easy, just a crop to the handsome guy on the left. The handsome guy on the right was down to see us from Salt Lake City. And then a couple of minutes making that arm disappear into the foliage. Well, here's the photo that started this problem, because Greg, the president, took the photo. He was not in it. Thought we had a second shot of him when he handed the camera off, but no, operator error. I waved my magic wand to put him in the photo for the newsletter and on our website, not an unusual activity for me. And then it became a short topic for our next monthly meeting. Local member topics are always needed when we cannot get a speakers bureau presentation. and because I opened my mouth and volunteered at our board meeting. So in that next Zoom meeting, a friendly lady from the APCUG saw my presentation and asked me to talk about it at the next VTC. And here I am. Nobody says no to Judy. Just kidding. So Greg and Jim from the Wayback Machine stepped up to provide the needed guy and back to stand behind his user group as he has for many years. All I had to do was some GIMP magic. Now, one more. Everything isn't about editing photos. Each month is a production of the newsletter. Each month, new topics. And to pique interest, my friend Hoodie takes a look under the hood to see what we'll be up to. One month, it was a discussion of solid state drives. Last month, Hoodie, as always, wearing his mask, saw we were discussing photo magic. How did the president get in that picture? Some YouTube information of interest, and members helping members. Note that in addition to the friends climbing into the hood, that magic wand casts a shadow on the computer case. But memories are made of this. What you see is what was real. While her mom gave us some space, we bonded. The real memories were not about the things around us, but the future before us. That little girl has graduated high school, is working, starting college this fall, actually this Monday. Everything else is just window dressing. But where did all those other authentic looking parts of the photo come from? Answer? Well, around the world. Train stations out west and faraway places, manipulated, arranged, and shaped. Photos like these. Each one a piece of the photo. To match the feeling in the mind, the how involves a good tool like GIMP. So now I'm going to give you some, from those photos, how they were placed together. The trick is using transparency and layers. We'll look at the princess and the road. We'll look at the missing man with the prince and the president. I'd give my right arm for the perfect headshot. It was pretty simple. And some of the tools used in making that winning photo. So now I need to shift over to my GIMP application. So there's GIMP on my desktop. I'll give it a start. What we're going to start with is the photo of the bike on the road. So I already have the files saved as projects, so I'm going to reopen that project. In reality, one would normally import a photo and start editing it, but we're going to get a head start on it by starting off with the photos already loaded. Now here is the original photo. Now then, just to kind of help orient you a little bit on the screen, up in the top left are tools and some information such as the photo that we're looking at. On the right is information about an individual tool, its size, its shape, its aspect ratio, other features unique to that particular tool. And down along the bottom right corner here, you'll see a series of small thumbnails. These are the thumbnails of the individual layers of photos that I'm going to be working with. The first thing we need to do is look at our two photos. So there's the first one. There's the second one. And as you can see, they don't quite match up. Our job is going to be to make them match better. I'm going to begin, because I already know where this needs to go, by putting this photo somewhere off to the left side in order to bring the other photo in to this workspace. I'm going to take that photo, and what we're going to do is we're going to match up the horizon so that we're in the ballpark with the two photos. So there you can see the two photos line up, but there's a problem in the middle, and we need to make that road look like it didn't get chopped, and the sky needs to be matched up because the time difference, the sky looks different. So what we're going to do is we're going to begin by erasing parts of this picture with the mailbox in it. And I'm going to take and erase some of it so that the road behind it shows through. And oops, got to get on the right picture here. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, now that's the eraser tool, but you notice there's a problem. The road's not showing through. The reason is I don't have transparency turned on this layer. So I'm going to undo those changes, Control Z, and I'm going to, on this photo, I'm going to turn on a feature called transparency. I go down to the transparency menu, and I'm going to add what's called an alpha channel. With the alpha channel turned on now, when I erase, the photo behind it begins to show through. I'll demonstrate that by turning off the original photo here, and you can see that I have got the eraser taking out the part of the road that's going to be replaced with the long road into the sunset there. So that's how you do that, so that you get the road shining through. Now, obviously, you need to be careful in how much you erase, because if you erase too much, you've got to go back and undo. I'm going to jump forward to where I have actually erased these two photos into a correct pattern. I'm going to show you, first of all, the road. First of all, in order to make the sky match up, I had to add some picture because getting the horizons to align left me some missing photo up here at the top. So what I did was I just copied a lot of this sky up here to make it match. And I also added a little bit of roadway down to the bottom to complete the picture that was going to be needed there. The other photo, I erased most of the road, and I have taken the sky and kind of smeared it, kind of smudged it, so that when the two of them overlay each other, those two colors will match up. I also added a little bit of a fake road down here that I manufactured out of the existing weeds and grass, and added to the bottom of the picture, so that when we add the two pictures together, we have one complete photo with a very nicely matched up sky. Now, the way to match that sky up is using another one of the tools, and I'm going to go up here to use a tool called the smudge tool. So using the smudge tool, I can take pieces of the picture, and just like you would on wet paint, and I'm going to make a smear that doesn't really work good for this picture, but to show the effect, I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to hold down the Control key and the scroll wheel so that I can zoom in. And I'm going to smudge. Oops, got to get on the right layer. I can just smudge that grass out and make it extend to where I want it to. And that way, when I put the two layers together, we now have an inappropriate smudge of the grass. I did the same thing on the sky up at the top, where I just took the sky and smudged it over and layered it on top of the other photo, which I also took some of its colors from the other side and brought them together. So it's just a matter of almost painting like an artist would with wet paints to create the color density from each side into the photo. Now you'll notice over in my layers, this middle layer, I've got a layer of red. I'll show you what I use that for. Oftentimes, it's difficult to see what you've actually smudged or where boundaries on photos are. So with a contrasting color, it makes it much easier to find where to erase what you've smudged and so forth. So I use this technique almost always when I'm doing a two photo overlay. Now I'm going to go to another photo, the photo of the girl in the hallway, and let me find her on here. So here's the girl in the hallway, again holding down the control key and the wheel, scroll wheel to zoom in. You can see that this is just the hallway, not quite the background that you'd want for a nice little picture like this. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the transparency for this layer. Let's see, it looks like I've already got transparency turned on. Okay, so go to my eraser tool and I begin erasing. Let me get on the right layer. Get on the right layer here. Oh, not that layer. Why is my eraser tool not working? Well, for some reason my not on the right layer. There we go. Oh, got to turn the transparency on. There we go. Okay, now turning on the transparency. Doing this kind of picture is very time consuming because you want to erase just as close as you can to the subject of interest. So you get the bulk of it erased, and then you reduce the size of your tool, in this case the eraser tool, so that you can go in and go very precisely around everything that you want to do, and you can get down to a very small level where you can be very accurate with what you're doing. The better accuracy you get at removing the unwanted background, the better the final product will be. So you erase what is undesired, and when you put a layer behind it, it will show up as if the person was standing in front of that layer. Now, you just continue that process over and over and over again until you have gotten a picture all the way down to that. So here's the final product, and I'm going to zoom in just a moment on something specific. Notice that the hair looks a little bit, well, fuzzy, out of focus. And that's a technique used to make the picture actually look better, because in reality, the erasing could have made it look a very hard border, and that hard border would look like a sticker stuck on front of a picture. But this, when combined with a background, makes the presentation look as if the person was really in the room. Now, one other technique that I use to make the person have presence, notice it looks like she's actually got a shadow in the room. Well, that shadow wasn't in the original picture. If we turn that off, you'll see how the layer has her shadow right there. That was done with a tool called the find the right one here. Where's that? Dodge and burn. So I'm going to use the dodge tool. The burn tool to burn in the image. I need to increase the size. And get on the right layer. Oops, looks like I'm on dodge, so I need to go to burn. So I need to burn. See how I can make that darker, making it appear that she has a shadow. I could even put a shadow on the other side, making it look like she had a little bit of cross lighting. So this is a technique to give presence to the individual, to make it look as if they were really there, when, of course, they were not. Next photo we're going to look at is that photo with the prince and the princess. We're going to go to the photos that make up that photo. Here's the guy in the hallway without any editing done on him. Again, we're going to use the same technique. We're going to turn on the transparency and erase everything around him that does not belong, specifically all of the white. Now, there are several tools, as anyone who's used GIMP might point out, that I could have done this with. There's a couple other tools that you can select by color and erase by color. But for simplicity, we're just going to keep just use a basic erasing tool. And after you've erased everything that you don't want from him, you wind up with just the guy. Now, I've done some other editing around him here that you'll see in just a minute was necessary to add context to the young lady after the man on her right has been erased, and she winds up with just her, and I had to add a little bit of length to her legs in order to make it fit the picture. And when you put the two of them together, you've got her standing right beside him. Now, there was some resizing that had to be done in order to make the two pictures in scale to each other. And of course, sometimes you have to move them around in order to make them be in the correct position. But once you've got them in the correct position, then all you have to do is add a background, and there they are together. So again, it was just editing, erasing away the parts of the picture you don't want, and finding a photo that will match the sunlight, the shading, and so forth of the photo that you want to create. Next one we're going to look at is a very simple photo. The headshot was a simple photo taken a couple weeks ago, myself and my son. I thought it would make a pretty good headshot, but I really don't want his arm in the picture. That's really not necessary for what I'm wanting to do. So, zooming in just a little bit, what we're going to do is we're going to use a different tool. It's called the clone tool. And the clone is simply used to make a copy of a piece of the picture that you want to make somewhere else. Let me show you an extreme example of it. I'm holding down the Control key, and I'm clicking on that part of the screen right there, which is going to leave a little circle. It may be hard for you to see on your screens. It's a pretty small set of dots around that spot. But if I come down here and do like this, you can see that I can add whatever I want to in another location. That's cloning. And Control Z to undo that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that picture, that piece of the background, and I'm going to put it into my picture. And I'm going to take some of the t-shirt, and I'm going to wipe out the t-shirt, wipe out the hand on the t-shirt. And then we just do that until we get all the pieces that we want edited, doing the same thing over here, taking the background, erasing the background where we don't want it to where we want its shoulder. And eventually you wind up with a picture that looks something like this, where the background is gone. And you can also do things like smudging the edges to make the edge in the final photograph disappear against the background. So there's the edited photo. Now then, the next photo we're going to do is we're going to be putting somebody in that wasn't there. This is going to be a case of the missing president. Here is a photo. It's already had a couple little minor retouches done to it. Notably, I changed the color of the icing on the cake to match the color of our corporate colors, if you will. You see the t-shirts that several of us are wearing in what has become kind of our corporate color. But we're missing a key individual in the back here. The first trick in making a photo like this is finding a suitable subject to set in there. Obviously, in this photo, we've got full-length bodies, so you need somebody with head and shoulders, legs, waist, feet, and everything. That was a challenge for this particular photo, and I couldn't really find a good one. The best photo I could find was let's see, was a photo of Greg at a picnic that we had in 2014. Now, this is pretty much what he looks like, so it is well representative of him, but we're missing the legs. So what I did was I pasted that photo into our desired location, and you can see there's an obvious problem there. Well, we don't want all of that. So once again, we go to the eraser tool and erase the parts of the photo we don't want. So I can see that I've got the transparency already turned on this layer. And you can see that what I did was I just erased all of those trees and everything behind him out of the photo, and including our former president. And eventually I wind up with a photo that has just Greg peeking over the shoulders of the other guys. So I'll fast forward just a little bit here to turn on a layer that has Greg, and there you'll see Greg has all been trimmed out. Now then, the reality is I made most of Greg disappear. If you look at what I actually wound up with, there is all that was left of Greg after doing all of the editing. Just a little view of him between a couple body parts in the slot there, and his head and shoulders. Now, the other problem I had was that I didn't have photo of the pants, so I took it from another photo. I added his pants in by doing the same technique. Again, that's just a little tiny piece of photo. Everything erased except what I don't want. And you've got the president. Oops, turn the right one on. There we go. So you've got Greg in the photo where he never really was because he was behind the camera. That's the technique that's used for the replacing the missing person photo. Now then, my last subject is looking at the railway photo. This is the photo that I submitted to the APCUG for the photo contest, and it is much more complicated, much more complex than the other photos we've seen so far. This was the original photograph. The building on the right and the Pullman cars on the right are the only thing that will remain eventually of the final photo. But taking inspiration from the empty chair sitting all along the warehouse building, I was able to find photographs of different railway stations. And I actually found one with someone sitting in the chair, if you will. So the first thing, though, that I did was to isolate on the key subjects. The key subjects being the guy walking, and the background buildings. Now, the first thing I did for myself was I got rid of that ugly camera strap going across my back. Again, this was done using the clone feature and that I demonstrated just a moment ago. Just cloned the shirt in and made that a little bit more presentable. The other thing that I did do was I darkened the shadow because on the final photo, it needed a little bit more boldness to see the shadow. The other thing that I did was I isolate, and I'm going to turn everything else off now. So there you have just the key individuals walking down an invisible building. I also isolated the Pullman car and the railroad and the building on the right. I'm going to take those out for just a moment, though. We'll see them appear in the final photo. The next photo that I added was a railway station to provide some context for where we are. Well, it already looks a lot better. Oddly, well, not surprisingly, the railroad is in exactly the right position. Not a surprise since, well, pretty much all railway stations like this are going to be built the same way. The railway along the side and a walking corridor. And this one's got a nice canopy over the top, but it's got a sign in a language that isn't exactly the language that I would have used. So we've got a lot of work to do. First thing that we're going to add is some better sidewalk. So I'm going to add a little bit of flagstones to the sidewalk. This was from one photograph, and then I took that particular chunk of flagstone, made a duplicate copy of it, changed the perspective of it, shifted it, and did a little editing to it to create the same piece of sidewalk on the other side. So those are both one and the same original piece of sidewalk with just a little bit more photo magic added to them. Next, let's do something about that sign. So a genuine, from some museum somewhere, photo of a Santa Fe piece of tile work, that does a good job of replacing there. Then down at the far end of the track, we've got the platform number. Here from an old Western station somewhere is platform number 1. Next, we add some building pieces. Now, these 2 building pieces are from one same photo. I'm going to isolate on it for just a moment to show you that photo a little bit closer. You can see that the photo has the elements there, but part of it is cut away because we have a chair from the other photo. So in order to make the layers work correctly, you have to erase some pieces of other photos in order to get the pieces to match up. So there you have, there you have the same 3 windows duplicated in order to make the final photo. Then we need to add some interest behind us here. We'll put a warehouse doorway on the left, and from another photo, some more brick wall. So now we're just about there. Let's turn on the rest of our sidewalk. All that's left at this point is to add our original buildings in. And now you've got a memory worth keeping that never existed. So those are the basic tools that I used for those photos. A couple of tools that I didn't just show you great detail was photos, features like changing the size of a layer, changing the perspective, where I changed the actual angle of the sidewalk to make a match to the desired railway station. But there are a whole lot of tools up there. Each tool has its descriptor, size, other features. For example, let me find one that really changed it. There you can see quite a bit different set of features to do the editing for the scissors tool, the paintbrush tool, the paint tool. All of those tools you select from either there, or you can select from the menu, or you can also select them by right-clicking on the surface and edit the pick the tool and edit it directly. So 3 different ways to edit, 3 different ways to pick and fix tools. Pretty typical of most Windows software, where you have 3 ways to get something. Also, a lot of the tools have keyboard shortcuts, which I usually forget which ones do what, and so I have to always go back and look at the menu to remember what the tool shortcut is. So that is the essence of my photo editing.
Art, you got 10 minutes left.
Yes, I've got just a little bit of text, and then I will have some room for some questions.
Fantastic.
So there you've seen the 6 options that are the 6 different photos that I've edited. I know that I've gone over that awfully quickly. GIMP is a pretty sophisticated tool, and it has taken me several years to learn all of those techniques. But there are a number of good demonstration programs, tutorials that the GIMP organization itself has. The GIMP org's tutorials are actually quite good for starters. A search with Google or DuckDuckGo or in YouTube for GIMP primer or GIMP tutorial are both very lucrative searches, because a lot of these things are best seen in a watch me do it sort of a method. Particularly the YouTubes have got a lot of stuff. One of the good sources I found was this one called on opensource.com, Tricks for GIMP Beginners. It's really quite good. Now, as a bonus, and emphasizing and trading off on the concept of layers, I just recently discovered this, how to edit a PDF. If you've ever gotten a PDF that you really wanted to put, say, sign your signature on, or you had a PDF that you didn't have the source of, but you need to edit to show to someone else, and you wanted to change some words, fill in some blanks, or that sort of thing that you didn't have the original text, you can import a PDF into GIMP. It imports as multiple layers. So if you have a 23-page PDF, you wind up with 23 pages. But as I've shown you, all you have to do is isolate on just one, go in with, for example, the text tool, write or erase or do whatever you want to, and then save the file back out as a PDF. Now, speaking of saving files, the one thing that I didn't demonstrate, but it's quite simple, is how, after you've done all this editing, do you save the work? Well, first is saving the work with all the layers in the GIMP format. If you just do a save and name the file, it'll save as an XCF file, and that's the GIMP image file that I've been editing on. But of course, you probably want to put that file, that picture, on, say, your Facebook page or a web page or in a printed document, or maybe put it into a PDF even. You save that file in any one of the many image formats that are available. I usually use the JPEG format because it compresses them and I can control the compression and so forth. You can also save as a PNG or any one of about 16 other formats that are common to just about any image editing program. So if you're concerned about, well, you have a photo from somebody, but it's in a different format, you can go ahead and open that file, and then you can save it as that file or save it back as a different type of file after saving, of course, your edits. I think that's about all I have. I'm going to open it up because I know that there's probably a lot of questions, because I did skim over some of this stuff very rapidly, but I wanted to give you a big view from the top of how from simple to very complex you can do photo editing with GIMP. And I'll open it up to our moderator there for any questions.
Thank you very much, Art. I didn't get a chance to introduce you properly, but Art is, in fact, is the editor for, he's the editor for Under the Computer Hood user group.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed your presentation. I'm not one to do that kind of stuff, but I learned something. So yeah, you have about 89 people watching and a lot of questions, and we'll try
I'm
to
sure.
get to some of them, okay?
Go ahead.
How do you find GIMP software?
Well, how do you find GIMP software is right there at the gimp.org address.
All right.
And it is public. It's public software. It's free. So it works on Linux and Windows 10, Windows 11, anything.
All right. What capabilities does GIMP offer that Photoshop doesn't have?
Well, I'm probably not the best person to ask that question because I have avoided Photoshop somewhat like a plague. but I know that there are tools that in Photoshop are different than GIMP. I have seen a couple photos being edited at some professional studios where I had some photos taken. They brought the photo up in Photoshop. They did some manipulation, and I thought, wow, that's pretty neat. But to give you an honest comparison of the two, I can't do that. I'm sure that if you did a search on compare GIMP to Photoshop, that Google or DuckDuckGo or YouTube would probably be your friend.
Fantastic. I like that answer. Now, back at 33 minutes after the hour, somebody said, I do not understand the order of layers.
Good question. Excellent question. And I'll go ahead and I'm going to open the GIMP photo back up again. And I'm going to go back to maybe a simpler photo here. Let me select I'm going to do the princess and the prince and the princess here. Right now, I've got no photos showing. Over on the right are my thumbnails of those photos. I'm going to bring up the very first one right there. There's the young man. He's the second from the bottom layer, as you see here. I'm going to take this layer that's called, well, it's just called layer, and I'm going to drag it up to here, make it visible. And you'll see now that the layer underneath of it is not visible. If I redrag and put it back in the other order, you can see now that the red layer is below the photo of the man. This photo here is on top of those two. So here you can see, and I'm going to just drag it around and move it around so you can see. You can see that in layers, in terms of layers, red, and then the young man, and then the two people are the three layers that are stacked on top of each other. Depending on how you arrange them, what you make invisible, what you erase, affects how you are going to compose this photo. There actually is another tool for doing the same sort of thing with layers, where you actually do almost exactly the opposite, where you let a piece of a photo show through a mask. There's a layers mask that I've not become proficient in, so I didn't demonstrate it, but it amounts to the same thing, where one layer lays beneath another layer and a piece of some picture shows through on the desired layer. So those are layers. They're draggable. You can move them up and down. And in fact, if we look at the photo with the court steps, if I take and drag the photo with Grandpa up on there, you can see now the two of them are standing, well, sort of, in front of the Supreme Court building. So layers are just like they were back in high school when you had the overhead projector and you had that layer, that map that had the U.S. outline, and the history teacher laid over it a layer that showed the different state boundaries, and then another layer that showed the Louisiana Purchase and all those things, and they were just layers stacked on top of each other. So that's layers.
All right. Now, another important question, I think, is there a manual for GIMP?
Yes, it's an online manual, and it's normally when you install GIMP, it will not automatically download that manual to your computer. You can download it separately, or while running GIMP, you can go to the F1 key, and it will bring up the help menu, and you can, and it's going to take it a little while to come up here because I don't often run with it running, but and I'm not having luck getting it to come up and show. But yes, the manual is quite extensive. It's a pretty well-written manual, although sometimes you almost have to know a little bit about GIMP in order to know the terms to go look at, and it's taken a little while to get it up here because I normally don't have it running. So you can download it, so it'll be instantly available, or if you don't download it, it's available online anytime.
Okay, fantastic answer. Is there a way to remove reflection on glass?
Well, If the original photo had that reflection that you don't desire, there are a couple of things that you can do depending on what you're trying to make show up on that piece of glass. If it's just a simple flat color, you can use the clone tool to clone the surroundings from the glass into that area. The other thing that you might be able to do, particularly if that reflection is a reflection of something in the background, you can use the dodge and burn tool. You can, for example, you could make a image that's being reflected on glass more visible by burning it to make it more pronounced, or you can dodge it to make it less pronounced and then copy, clone onto that surface some of the surrounding desirable color. As far as being able to remove the reflection, it's part of the picture. So you're going to have to do something more like, painting, creating that image in the place that you want to remove the reflection. But small reflections, if it's just like a reflection on the edge, say a little highlight reflection up at the top of a photo frame, and you're just kind of wanting to make it kind of disappear a little bit, oftentimes just dodging it will darken it enough that it's not noticeable.
Okay, again, Art, you got a lot of questions, and I'm trying to pick
I understand.
that you can get an answer to, but we're going to send you all the rest of them, and you're going to have a chance to answer many of them. Next one, how do you colorize the old black and white photos?
Well, gosh, I was hoping nobody would ask me that. The two photos that I showed in my presentation, and let me go back to the tutorial and see if I can scroll back to that real quickly here. And I'll just tell you what I did. Where are they at? There they are. This photo here, and is that showing up well enough for everybody? I don't need to go full screen, I don't think, with that.
Yeah.
The photo was just a simple black and white photo, obviously, and I used the paint tool and a high level of opacity, opaqueness, of transparency of the painting. I picked the paint color that I wanted, and I'm going to go back over to Windows, or to the GIMP here. Up in the top left here, you'll see the color, and you can pick the color. So for example, for my mother's photo, I picked a color probably somewhere up in that range there, something very, very light. And then using the paint tool, and see if I can do this on the fly here. And I'm going to change, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the paint tool's opacity to something very thin, about 41%. And I'm going to do some painting on here. So I'm painting blue onto that photo. Now, you have to do this very carefully and with many iterations and trying to come up with the right layer of stuff. But you can paint directly onto a photo with the transparency turned on, so that it's not like painting with a hard paintbrush. You can see that it's just a matter of trial and error. But I did that on that other photo. Now, the photo of Grandma and Grandpa, which is the next one, I actually created 4 different layers for this, and I did that same process, but putting each color on its own layer. So for example, there is a layer of dark blue that I applied over the what I assumed to probably have been blue jeans. I used a layer of what I called dark red on the red wagon. Who knows what color the real wagon was? I used my imagination. I used a very light, very, very light pink color for the faces, and just adding it very sparingly. And then, of course, I added some green on a green layer and some dark green for the dark green trees in the background. So it's another photograph, but it's about 6 layers deep, with each layer being a separate color. So that's how I did that photo. Now, be honest, there are probably some other tools out on the internet for colorizing photos that are more elegant than this. I was just having fun with this, and I thought, hey, Grandma and Grandpa, I'd like to colorize that. It was just for my own purpose, and probably not the best job of colorizing that has ever been done.
Alrighty. Lots of questions about how to do specific things,
Sure.
but I want to go back to a general question that we had. Is there copyright concerns? Because you're using some other photos to.
You have to be careful where you're getting photos and how you're using them. Most of those photos are, well, several photos were from museums, which are typically not copyrighted. There are two of the photos that were from, oh gosh, can't remember the name of the source, but I had to pay, I think, $5 for the two photos. So that is a potential. Oftentimes, the photos that you'll be using, though, particularly for a family photo, are going to be your own photos. So, of course, there's no copyright problems on those. But if you're doing something, you're not taking a photo from a public source or from Commons, you do need. Well, the other thing is, if you're producing this photo for publication for pay, putting it out there somewhere where it's going to get that kind of exposure, you definitely do. For most of my photos, I'm using them for my own personal use, and don't have any problem with that because they're on my own. They're in my photo albums that I've created.
Okay, I got a final question for you, and the question is from me.
Okay.
How long have you been using GIMP, and did you find it difficult to become proficient?
Well, I've been using it since 2014. Is it difficult? Yes, like anything new, it is difficult. It is much easier if you use some tutorials and you watch somebody else do it, because sometimes just the very idea of, oh, I have to go over here and click on a tool, or I have to right click on something to get a menu up. Those are the tricks that are common with any software, but a lot of the tutorials, because they are show and tell type of things, you see them clicking on that thing and see it happening. It begins to make sense to you.
Fantastic answer. I like that one too.